On a quiet autumn evening in New York City, the streets glowed with the fading hues of sunlight mixed with the early flickers of streetlights. David stood at the corner of 42nd Street, clutching a crumpled to-do list in one hand and a now-cold coffee in the other. His expression told a story of someone carrying far more than his fair share of stress. It wasn't just the day that had been overwhelming, it was every tomorrow looming ahead. David had always prided himself on being prepared, a man with a plan for every scenario. His friends called him Future Dave, half in admiration and half in jest, because he lived perpetually in the realm of what-ifs. Whether it was next week's presentation, next month's rent, or next year's career goals, David's mind was never in the present. He saw it as a strength, something that kept him ahead of the curve, but tonight, it felt like a curse. He had just come from a doctor's appointment, and the words were still ringing in his ears. His physician, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, had leaned forward and said bluntly, "David, your stress levels are through the roof. You're damaging your body, and for what? You've got to stop living in the future and start focusing on now. Or there might not be much of a future to worry about." Shaken, David wandered the streets until he found himself in Bryant Park. He slumped onto a bench, the city's noise and motion fading into the background as he stared at the carousel spinning in the distance. Around him, life was happening, kids laughing, couples strolling hand in hand, a man strumming a guitar. It was a stark contrast to the storm raging in his mind. That's when he noticed an older man sitting on a nearby bench, scattering breadcrumbs for the pigeons. The man was humming a cheerful tune, completely at ease with the world. He wore a weathered cap, and his face bore deep lines that spoke of both struggles and stories. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders," the man said, his voice warm and inviting. David glanced up, startled, and managed a half-smile. "Yeah, you could say that." The man chuckled and leaned back. "I've been there, son. Always worrying, always chasing. But tell me this, when was the last time you just stopped?" "Stopped?" David echoed, unsure what he meant. "Yeah, stopped. Sat still. Watched the world go by without trying to control it. Just let things be." David hesitated. "I don't know. I'm not sure I ever have. There's always something to do, something to prepare for." The man nodded knowingly. "You remind me of myself when I was your age. Always busy, always planning for a tomorrow that never seemed to come the way I expected. Let me tell you a story." David, intrigued despite himself, nodded. The man adjusted his cap and began. "When I was younger, I had a job I loved, a family I adored, and a million worries I couldn't seem to shake. I'd lie awake at night thinking about bills, my kids' futures, my own career, everything under the sun. My wife used to say, 'You're here, but you're not here.' And she was right. I was so focused on what might happen tomorrow that I missed what was happening right in front of me. One day my daughter asked me to play catch. I was sitting on the porch, distracted by work emails, and I barely even looked up. She said, 'Daddy, are you always going to be busy?' I didn't have an answer for her. That question haunted me. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to let tomorrow steal any more of my todays. I started small, putting my phone away during family dinners, taking walks without an agenda, playing catch whenever my daughter asked. At first, it felt strange, almost like I was wasting time. But the more I did it, the more I realized how much I'd been missing. Those small moments became the memories I cherished the most." David was silent, the man's words hitting closer to home than he cared to admit. "That's easier said than done," he said finally. "Of course it is," the man replied. "You don't just flip a switch and stop worrying. But you can choose where to focus your energy. Worrying about tomorrow won't change it. All it does is rob today of its joy. And here's the thing, when tomorrow comes, you'll handle it. You always do. You've made it through every yesterday so far, haven't you?" David nodded slowly. The man stood, brushing crumbs from his lap. "Take it one day at a time, son. You'll be surprised at how much more life you notice when you're not so busy trying to control it all." As the man walked away, David remained on the bench, watching the carousel spin and listening to the laughter of the children. For the first time in a long while, he didn't check his phone or think about his to-do list. He simply sat, breathing in the moment. We often live like David, caught up in a relentless cycle of planning and worrying. It feels responsible, even necessary, but in truth, it's a trap. We give so much of our energy to a future we can't predict that we forget the present is slipping through our fingers. But as David learned, life is not about controlling every twist and turn. It's about showing up for the moment you're in. When you stop obsessing over tomorrow, you free yourself to fully experience today. And it's in those moments, the laughter of a loved one, the warmth of the sun, the taste of your favorite meal, that life truly happens. This doesn't mean you abandon responsibility or stop planning altogether. It means you find balance. You prepare for tomorrow but don't let it overshadow today. You trust yourself to handle the future when it arrives because, as the man said, you've already handled every yesterday so far. So, ask yourself, how many moments have you missed because you were too busy thinking about what's next? What memories could you have made if you'd just been present? Start small. Spend an evening with your family without checking your phone. Take a walk and notice the world around you. Let go of the need to control everything and trust that you'll navigate life as it comes. Because here's the truth, tomorrow is uncertain and it always will be. But today is here, right now, waiting for you to embrace it. In the end, life isn't about how many days you've planned, it's about how many days you've truly lived. Stop worrying about tomorrow and start living for today. You'll be amazed at how much more fulfilling life becomes.